All right, thanks everyone. So again, here to learn about the 2023 street utility improvements. Mainly to go over scope of the project for tonight's meeting. So here's a pavement condition map for the whole city of Hopkins. Red is shown poor condition streets, blue and green are average or good condition streets. If you can see, I kind of boxed out the neighborhood we're looking at today, and all the streets that we're proposing to reconstruct are in poor condition. And this was a map back in 2015. So obviously they're even in worse condition now. So project development process. So there's a lot of planning that goes into each project. It starts years before we construct a project. So first, pavement management ratings, which we just looked at, is evaluated. Then also the conditions of the utilities under the ground are also evaluated for each street. Then they're put into a capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan, looking ahead 5 years with the city council on what projects we're doing. So this next year in 2023, your neighborhood is slated for construction. Right now we're in the preliminary design and feasibility stage. So just looking kind of do initial design efforts, survey efforts, and making sure the project is feasible and cost effective. Once we get past this phase, we'll be working on final design over the winter months, put together final plans and specifications, put out to bid for contractors, and then construction would be next. So here's a recap of the project area. So we're looking at 12th Avenue North, the first block north of Main Street, from Main Street to First Street. Then both 14th and 15th Avenue North, from Main Street to 2nd Street North. That short block is 2nd Street North from 14th to 15th. And then 16th Avenue North, 2 separated blocks, one from Main Street to 1st, and then from 2nd to 3rd. So we sent out resident questionnaires to the neighborhood earlier this summer. Got back a decent response rate, 30 questionnaires received. Some of the more common responses is that sidewalk is needed along 14th Avenue North, along Metzl Field, where it kind of discontinues at 2nd Street. So we're actually going to be proposing to put in sidewalk along the east side of 14th from 1st to 2nd, which we'll discuss in a little bit here. There's also a comment that sidewalks needed on 1st Street North between 14th and 15th. It kind of just dead ends between 15th and the alley mid-block. So we're going to propose to continue that from the alley to 14th, even though we're not doing any other construction on 1st Street. There's a lot of comments about sidewalk with low spots that pond and pool up and ice over during the winter. We're going to be replacing all the existing sidewalks throughout the neighborhood too. So should be getting rid of any of those grade and icy concerns. There's drainage issues at 16th Ave and Main Street. Several people commented on that. We'll be replacing all the curb and gutter and putting additional storm sewer catch basins as needed, which should improve drainage throughout the neighborhood. There's also some comments about overgrown and unhealthy trees throughout the neighborhood. Trees within the boulevard and city right-of-way have been and will continue to be evaluated by the project team and the city forester. We'll determine trees that need to be removed as part of the project. But also the project team is going to try to protect and save as many healthy trees in the neighborhood as much as we can. So here's some pictures of the existing pavement conditions out there. As you can see, and as you probably already know, a lot of cracking, a lot of alligator cracks, as you can see on the left, a lot of potholes, patches. It's in pretty rough shape all over. Here's an example of what a reconstructed street would look like. This example, I believe, is over on 8th Avenue North, just north of Main Street. We did about 10 years ago. You can see new, fresh asphalt pavement, new concrete curb and gutter, and new concrete sidewalks. So to go over some of the proposed street improvements, basically the same on every block, but this example is at 12th Avenue North. We're going to be replacing, like I said, replacing all the curb and gutter, the asphalt pavement, and the concrete sidewalks, and the concrete driveway aprons along with the curb and gutter. Along with the new asphalt pavement, we're also going to be installing a new aggregate base, so a gravel section and a sand section underneath that if needed. This will help support and give a good base section to the new asphalt pavement so it lasts longer. Basically, the street widths are going to stay relatively the same throughout the neighborhood. There are going to be a couple blocks that we're going to be narrowing the streets a little bit, which we'll go over on the next few slides here. But in general, the street widths are going to stay about the same. So for example, of a couple blocks where we're going to be narrowing the street width on 15th Avenue North, the existing street width is a little over 35 feet. That's excessively wide for residential street.
No.
Okay. Well, that's why we're having this discussion meeting for feedback.
Yeah.
So when I talk about narrowing, I'm talking about from 35 and a half to 32. So it's only a foot and a half on each side. So yeah, to recap, if anybody was having trouble hearing online, basically the concern is of narrowing 15th is mainly because of parking on both sides of the street. So again, the concern is parking with narrowing the roads, but as Eric said, narrowing the roads does help reduce speeds, and it also, I don't think you're going to see much of a difference in the winter. As Eric mentioned, with the wider boulevards, they'll be able to plow closer to the curbs. But
people try to get out of my parking lot.
sure. So actually at Main Street, we are going to keep the width the same. So basically between that alley, just north of Main Street and Main Street, we're going to keep the width of 35 feet. So that does help with those turning. Right. Right. So there for sure we'll maintain that width. So moving forward, I love this back and forth, but since we do have a few people online, I think let's save the questions for the end. Be a little easier for them to hear and communicate. Yep, I get it. So 16th Avenue North. Yep, here's the one where it's about 29 and a half feet. So about the same. But why have this on this slide? To just point out some storm sewer improvements. Most of the grades and elevations on these blocks are going to stay about the same. But this block, since it's so flat from end to end, we're probably going to add some low points, at least one low point to get the grades to work, and put new catch basin inlets at that low point and storm sewer so that we can improve the drainage to the neighborhood so the water actually has somewhere to go. So on this block, more than others, you might see some more grade elevation difference, maybe 6 inches a foot. So some pedestrian improvements, along with replacing all the sidewalks, the existing sidewalks are there. As I mentioned before, we're proposing to extend a couple of sidewalks, one being on 14th Avenue North on the east side by Metzel Field, where it kind of dead ends at the stairs just north of 2nd. We're going to continue that to the south all the way down to 1st, right along the back of curb. In order to do that, we are looking to narrow 14th, just about a foot and a half. Just enough to fit that 6-foot sidewalk in there. Right now it's very wide. It's 35 and a half feet wide. So just narrowing that to 34 feet. Yep. I know there's a lot of parking on that Metzel Field, so we didn't want to narrow it too much, but we needed to narrow it just enough to get that sidewalk in there. And then the other added sidewalk is, as I mentioned before, on the north side of 1st Street, where it dead ends at the alley between 15th and 14th, just to continue that half a block. So moving on to utility improvements. First being the sanitary sewer. We're proposing to replace all the old clay sanitary sewer pipes in the neighborhood with new plastic PVC sewer pipe and new concrete manholes. So this is probably the most intrusive part of the project. It's deep excavations up to 15 feet deep. So that will take some time as we go through the neighborhood and replace the sanitary sewer. This is in the street, but I will get to how there will be some utility work in the yards. So another utility improvement is the water main. We'll be replacing the old brittle cast iron water main. That's also 6 inches in diameter with new ductile iron water main, which is stronger, and upsizing it to 8 inches for better fire flow. Also replacing all the hydrants and gate valves. So service line replacement for both the water services and sewer services to each house. This is where we'll be digging into the yard a little bit. We'll be replacing from the main in the street to the right-of-way line, which is about 10 to 15 feet behind the edge of the street, or in most cases, just behind the sidewalk, as you can see in the picture here. So that's where we'll be replacing to as part of the project. And then potential private replacement, if people are interested, they can replace the rest of the service from that point to the house and hire a private plumber to do that. So the full service is owned by the property, but we'll be doing half of it as part of the project. Both. So for sewer, for what we're doing, since we're already opening up the street, doing an open cut, we're going to be replacing it with new plastic PVC pipe like we're doing with them. If you wanted to do something with your sewer service beyond that point to the house, lining it is a good option. Yeah, it typically is cheaper because there's less stuff you got to dig up, but it's not always feasible. If you have a collapsed pipe or something, they're not going to be able to line it. They have to use the existing pipe, so it has to be in decent enough shape. Yep, they'll televise the line to make sure they can line that. We have some contacts, people we've worked with before, and they do a good job of televising and telling you if they can even do it or not.
So would you actually be getting someone in the process that you're working on this?
You
Or
could.
is it like, oh, we're going on a month or so?
You could, and we'll work with you. Our inspector on the field can work with you guys what the best timing is for your plumber to come in and do the rest of the private work.
So you already got it signed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be a good timing to do it while, you know, we have some of the grass torn up, the sidewalks torn up, so they're not tearing some of that stuff up again. The boulevard trees, as I mentioned, trees may be removed for one of four reasons, basically. First being they're an ash tree. I think, yep, several trees have already been removed because of that this fall. We'll be grinding, I think they're leaving the stumps. We'll be grinding the stumps as part of our project next spring. I think there's going to be a couple other ash trees part of the project that will remove, but and then trees in poor health or poor condition, they're dead, dying, leaning. So there's about a dozen or so of those trees that would be removing. Then there's trees that are in conflict with either the sewer or water service lines. Lots of times, unfortunately, the sewer or water go right underneath the tree and it's just unavoidable. We got to take that out. Or they're in conflict with road construction or grading. Most of the time in this neighborhood, since there's a lot of tight boulevard space, some of the trees are overgrown onto the curb, onto the sidewalk, pushing up the sidewalk, the curb. And once we start removing that curb, that sidewalk, they're just not going to survive.
You also can take out the only driveway entrances.
Only driveway entrances. Oh, I guess so. Any driveway aprons that go to nowhere, probably. And then any trees that are removed will be replaced with a tree at the end of the project. And residents will have we'll give notice of, you know, if we're removing a tree and then what tree species you would like. And typically you get, you know, 3 choices. Most people get their top choice on what tree species they like. Unfortunately not. They are sizable though for a new tree. They're typically put in 2-inch diameter trees, so that they're not just the twig ones that take forever to grow. Yeah, good starter tree. Yep. All right, so probably not so fun slide, but this project is proposing to have special assessments to the property owners. Every street reconstruction project in Hopkins does special assessments to the individual properties. That keeps taxes down in general to the city, but when a project comes through, assessments are proposed. So for a reconstructed street, that is, they're not proposed for if we just do a mill and overlay and maintenance type, like was mentioned for 6th Avenue this year. So individual letters with estimated assessment amounts will be mailed out in October. So a street assessment is probably the biggest portion of the assessment. 70% of the total street improvement cost is passed along to the homeowner. This will vary for each property though, based on the front footage. So if you have a 50-foot wide lot, you'll be paying less than a 100-foot wide lot. This front foot rate is subject to a cap though, which I'll get into on the next slide. And then streets with no adjacent property addresses. So 2nd Street North, that one short block we're doing in this project, will be distributed 1 block north and south. But the block south, since you guys will already be paying an assessment for your street, it won't add to your costs. So it'll just add a small cost to the houses north of 2nd Street. Utility mains, so the water main, sanitary sewer main, storm sewer, there's no assessments for that work. Utility services though, so those water and sewer services that we talked about, there will be individual assessments for that. That'll be 50% of the as-bid actual construction costs. The total assessment would be the utility service assessments plus the street assessment. So those front foot rate caps I was mentioning before, since construction costs can get out of hand and they've been increasing rapidly every year, a while back the city implemented a front foot rate cap where the cost would only increase 3% every year per foot. So for this project, that rate would be $103.05 per front foot. So say you had a 50-foot wide lot, your street assessment would be roughly $5,000. And then consider the utility costs. You typically see about $1,500 for the sewer service and $1,500 for the water service. So that total assessment for a 50-foot wide lot would be about $8,000, just to give you some bearings. The front footage is also capped. I don't know if we're going to run into this on any properties in this neighborhood, but if there's anything over 125 feet, we stop it at 125 feet. Again, and these caps are just for single-family residential properties. They do not apply to commercial properties or apartment buildings. However, we are doing benefit appraisals for any commercial properties or apartment buildings. Those have not come in yet, but we ordered special benefit appraisals for what the benefit would be for the project, and we'll compare that amount to what it would be for the city policy and use the lower of the two. So preliminary assessment amounts, again, will be mailed to each property receiving an assessment within the next month. This will be prior to our second neighborhood meeting later in October and prior to the public improvement hearing, which is a regular city council meeting, the first one in November. So project schedule. Tonight we're having our first neighborhood meeting. We're reviewing existing conditions, presenting proposed improvements, and collecting input. First city council meeting, or the next city council meeting we'll be presenting at is on October 4th, presenting our feasibility report, and then the council will call for the public hearing. On October 24th, which is a Monday night, we'll be doing a second neighborhood meeting where we'll be doing similar things, reviewing the proposed improvements and collecting input, but also be going into the assessments in a little more detail and have assessment numbers for each property at that time. And then November 1st, we'll go to council again to conduct a public hearing on improvements and ask council to consider ordering the final plans. Moving on to next year, January 17th will be another city council meeting to approve final plans and authorize bidding. February 10th, we'll be opening bids from contractors. February 21st, council will be ordering the public hearing on assessments. Sometime in March, we'll be having a third neighborhood meeting to review final assessments, final plans, and collect additional input. And then March 21st, we'll be conducting the public hearing on assessments at that council meeting. Consider adopting the assessment role and awarding the contract to the low bidder. And then construction would start probably in May and likely wrap up in October. Construction could start as early as April if we get a favorable winter. And then final punch list and cleanup items may go late into the fall, into November, or even into the following spring. So that's a good question. So the assessment payment plan, we'll go over this in more detail at the next meeting too, but basically you have a couple of options. You can prepay with no interest, and that's usually due midsummer around July. Yep, next year. And then you could prepay between that July date, whatever that's going to be, and I think it's end of November with some interest to the city. And then after that, it just rolls onto your county taxes and you pay with interest over a 15-year period. But we'll let you know once we have the interest rate, plenty of time ahead of that prepay date, so you can make a decision if you want to prepay some or all. Or so we'll be sending out letters in the next month about a preliminary assessment amount. Won't have any interest information yet, and even those totals are preliminary. We'll have final assessment amounts after we get bids from contractors and get actual dollar amounts. Then we'll send out a notice at that point, and interest rates might be available at that time in March, or it might be a little later. Yeah, so if the rates are after that assessment hearing, the final assessment amounts, we'll send out another notice, likely with a construction notice about what that interest rate is and a recap of the timeline. So the question was, will we be doing the work in numeric order, like 16th Avenue last, 12th Avenue first? And not necessarily. It will be phased. Construction will be phased. We're not going to do everything at once. We're going to move from block to block, maybe do a couple blocks at a time. But we won't know that schedule until we have a contractor, which won't be until next spring. And yes, we will let you know. We have multiple forms of communication. We'll mail out newsletters on a monthly basis. We have a website, which leads me into my next slide here. Our website's hopkins-2023.com, where you can sign up for email updates and text updates that we send out on a weekly basis throughout construction. We'll also post project documents like this presentation to the website, this recorded presentation to the website, along with construction updates. So Yep. There will be roadwork signs all over. You'll see a lot of orange. It'll say roadwork ahead or road closed it through traffic. And typically we even put out signs a week before any work starts that says road work begins such and such date. So yeah, how long is a block going to be under construction? That's a good question. So even though construction is lasting from May to October for the whole neighborhood, each block I would say is going to be under construction for about 3 months. And the first month being the most difficult part with the utility work, this sanitary sewer water main. Then the second month gets a little easier with the roadway work, new pavement, new curb and gutter. And then the last month's not really restricted to access. It's putting down the new sod, tree planting, signs, stuff like that. Maybe during the day, but they'll have access every evening. We refill the holes. What's that? Yeah, except for the apron part. So for the most part, every evening, they'll refill every hole they excavate, and you'll have and regrade. It'll probably be a temporary gravel driveway, but you'll have access into your driveway. The exception to that is when we pour the new concrete curb and driveway apron, you'll have to be out for 3 to 7 days, depending on the type of driveway. Yep, that's a good point. The conditions, if we're getting a lot of rain, obviously the dirt gets muddy, it gets sloppy. Access can be a struggle during the rain, and we try to work with people to try to put down heavier rock to maintain access, but that could be times where we ask people to stay off the roadway if they can. They're going to mill the street. I mean, yeah, they're going to come through and reclaim the street. So they're going to grind up the pavement. It mixes the underlying base material if there's any, and that existing asphalt. And then we reuse that material as the new base material. So yeah, that's basically the first thing they're going to do. Sure. So that shouldn't be an issue after we come through. We'll grind that up, and then we're going to pave new asphalt tops. See, I think that's it for the website. Again, hopkins-2023.com. Main project contacts as of right now is myself, project manager of Boulder Mink, and then Eric, city engineer. That's all I got for now. I'm going to open up to questions for anybody online quick here. Madeline, is there any questions coming in from people online?
Yes, one question. Could you speak to how the intersections between the streets and alleys will be handled? when they looked at the drawings, it appears the alley entrances will be widened. This person is in favor of making them wider as they believe it will make intersections safer for vehicle traffic.
Yeah, so alley entrances will get wider. The standard is to have a kind of a 15-foot wing apron on each side to make it easier for train movements, for garbage trucks. So I don't know if that answers the question, but yes, alley entrances will be wider generally. Anything
Thank
else?
you. Not that I can see. Last call for questions.
And then if you guys have any more general questions, otherwise we can take individual questions up here after.